Special meeting of the Finance Committee, sitting as the Ethics Committee, to order. I don't know, we have minutes or not? So, first up is review of investigation report and recommendation to Common Council on final disposition of John Kraft ethics complaint against Councilmember Joyce Hall. I don't know how many people we have in the audience, but we might have to repeat this as people come in. We're not taking testimony on this tonight, and so also please be respectful of the proceedings, and I think that's about it. If you're not, I guess we'll have to deal with that. Nick?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Finance Committee sitting as the Ethics Committee tonight. You have in front of you, my letter of January 6th, which transmits to this committee the investigation summary that was prepared by my colleague, Attorney Lyda Bannock, and you have my letter that summarizes the process before you. The subject of the ethics complaint are statements that are made by Councilmember Hall on December 6th, and the question is whether those statements violate Section 37-1 and 37-2 of the city's ethics code as alleged by Mr. Kraft. The goal of Attorney Bannock's investigation was to complete a review of the relevant statute that was being discussed at the time, the ethics complaint, the particular provisions of the ethics code in a manner that was independent, impartial, and responsible, and ultimately that didn't have oversight by myself or any other member of the city. She was completely independent as she put this investigative summary together. You have the background, the scope, and the methodology of her investigation. You have Mr. Kraft's complaint. You have the statements that were made that were alleged to have been made in violation of the ethics code. You have the relevant ethics code provisions. You have the context and the text of Wisconsin Statute 7.30, which relates to a council member's authority to challenge for cause any poll worker that is nominated or placed before the body for appointment. You have the definition of good cause, and you have the investigative findings. From my perspective, as the city attorney, having reviewed the investigation summary, it's my conclusion that we have the information necessary for the Finance Committee, sitting as the Ethics Committee, to make a determination on final disposition of the ethics complaint. Now, the Ethics Code does indicate that following an investigation, if you'd like more information, you are entitled as a committee to move this to a public hearing. And as a matter of policy, if you find, and if it is your determination that additional information is necessary to render a final recommendation on disposition to the Common Council, we can certainly do that, and that could be one course of action that you take tonight. A second course of action would be a recommendation of dismissal of the complaint. A third course of action could be a motion on discipline in the form of written censure or admonishment that the council would issue. So those are really your three options. What's really at issue here, and I hope you see this in the investigative summary, in the investigation that Lyda Bannock completed, is really a question of the statements made and whether they were appropriate for the purpose offered. And the purpose offered, I think it's undisputed, ultimately was to challenge for a cause Mr. Kraft as a poll worker. As we discussed previously, the statute provides for a process where the Republican Party and the Democratic Party both submit the names of their registered members who they intend and who they propose to serve as poll workers. That process is inherently political, and for those positions where a Republican they are matched with a Democrat, so that there is no appearance of impropriety in the election process. We know that the statute, as you have it in the report, also provides for the opportunity of a council member to challenge for cause the qualifications of a person that is submitted. And Councilmember Hall made comments with respect to her opinion of Mr. Kraft and his ability to serve under that statute, and that's what the investigative report finds. There are comments that Attorney Bannock has provided with respect to the support for those comments in interviewing Mr. Kraft and interviewing Councilmember Hall. Attorney Bannock provides her opinion as to whether there was support offered for the statements that were made, whether there was proper support, whether ultimately the statements were accurate, and you should consider those investigative comments. At the end of the day here, the question for the Finance Council, or for the Finance Committee to consider in determining what goes to the Common Council is whether the statements were appropriate and consistent with the ethics code, whether they were an appropriate challenge under state law, and whether they were supported by a motive that's consistent with your ethics code. Your ethics code is pretty clear, is very clear, that public officials are required to be independent, impartial, and responsible to the people, that the public have confidence in the integrity of its government, and that the public officials observe in their official acts the highest standards of morality and to discharge faithfully the duties of their office, regardless of personal consideration, or recognizing that the public interest must be their prime concern, and that their conduct shall be above reproach, so as to foster respect for all government. And so that's the discussion. As you note in the report, we did not render, Attorney Bannock did not render an ultimate conclusion. That is your job as policymakers to match the statements with the support for the statements with the requirements of the ethics code in determining the recommended course of action for the Common Council. And so at this time, again, I put before you the three options. The first option, which would be to move this matter to a public hearing for additional fact-finding, which is not being recommended unless you so desire and find a need for additional fact-finding. Option 2 is to recommend dismissal of the complaint. Option 3 is to recommend some form of disciplinary consideration, disciplinary action to the Common Council, which would be in the form of a censure or a written admonishment that would be voted on by the Common Council. So with that, I will stop there. I'm happy to answer any questions regarding the process that Attorney Bannock undertook, my process in reviewing her findings, the information that you have before you, and I'd also turn it over for further discussion and action.
Mr. Vivian, do we need a motion right away, or can we have discussion before a motion?
You can certainly have discussion before a motion.
May I make a statement before you get started?
We weren't going to take statements, but yeah, go ahead.
Shortly before the city council meeting on December 6th, I received 2 messages from city residents telling me that they were opposed to Mr. Kraft working as a poll worker due to what they felt were his inappropriate Facebook posts regarding the listening session held at Lakefront Park in September of 2020, and also due to the fact that his resignation as chair of the St. Croix County Republican Party was requested by the executive committee due to his website post. I have always tried to act in the best interests of the city and the residents of District 6. In good faith, I brought these objections forward as part of my responsibility in the process. I have the responsibility to represent my constituents. The council has a responsibility to review the list of potential workers, poll workers, and express any objections. The council shouldn't rubber stamp whatever comes before it. While I strongly believe that people have the right to hold their public officials accountable, I am concerned that baseless complaints like this hurt our council and the citizens who entrust us with their concerns and want their voices heard. If we as council members worry that we will be hit with ethics complaints for doing our job or stating a controversial opinion, this could have a chilling effect on local government and our ability to do the people's work. This is not about partisanship. I hope that the committee will send the right message by recommending dismissal of this complaint. Thank you.
Thanks, Joyce. Anybody?
Well, then I'll go ahead and make a motion to dismiss the charges against Councilmember Hall.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second? Is there a second? Is there a second? Motion fails for lack of a second.
I should have maybe jumped in a little bit earlier. I kind of wanted to have a discussion. I mean, this is a little bit of a new territory, certainly for me. You know, as I take a look at the investigation, thank you for supplying everything, Mr. Vivian, and your team. You know, for me, looking at how I approach certain topics, certainly at City Council, right, and Finance Committee, is kind of coming up with data that supports. And so my concern overall is doing the job that we need to do as council persons ahead of time before making allegations towards a person who is not here. So that's where my struggle is with it, and I just wanted to hear input from Alderperson Brooke, Alderperson Morissette about your perspectives, because for me it's a tough one.
You know, as I reviewed everything and have read the Code of Ethics and detailed everything that we have received, it does become abundantly clear that Councilmember Hall was acting in public interest. That was her primary concern. That is Code of Ethics 37.2. All the evidence that we saw surrounding this episode affirms that those were the intentions. Albeit, it could have been, research could have been done before, but if her statement has shown that she heard concerns from her constituents, and so that is what she was bringing forward. I do also want to point out that a lot of this is a moot point because Mr. Kraft was approved. Council Member Hall's concerns were not affirmed by the council. His past actions and his past behaviors have been well documented in very public places and reputable news sources. So that is where I can find, I feel that she has honored what the Code of Ethics has called for. I do want to just point out one thing, that as I read the Code of Ethics multiple times, and I actually heard Mr. Vivian made point of this tonight too, right in that first sentence under 37.1, it talks about being impartial. I feel as we move forward as a council, we need to think about that. How can you possibly advocate for any position and be impartial? I just don't think, can you guys think of a way that you can be impartial and advocate for something? I'm not sure that that's a realistic expectation to hold people up to. If it is, I think there's lots of violations, and I think the concern that Councilmember Hall raised tonight, that this is a slippery slope if we continue in this.
May I ask one question? When you say impartial, can you give me an example?
Well, any position you're advocating for, you are taking a position in support of something. That's showing partiality. So, for example, when we were advocating for masks in city-owned buildings, that's a very partial position. When folks were not advocating for it, that's a very partial position.
Mm-hmm.
How can you have discussions without taking a position?
Right. And the example that I kind of come up with too in thinking about this is, and hats off to you, I want to say, for bringing the eco vehicles to light, right? And that position that you took, which, again, to your talking about partiality, but it's also part of making an argument, right? And supporting facts around that argument. And that's what I see our function with, and that's where I'm kind of stuck with this whole piece here. I mean, how, another way to approach is, okay, I don't have time to do all this research and show the council. Can I make a motion to say, I approve the list, but I really want to take a look at Mr. Kraft. Can we do that at the next council meeting? I mean, that would have been, to me, an interesting approach. Again, that's where I'm stuck.
Yeah.
Bill, can I address you said he wasn't here for this meeting. The meeting was properly noticed. His name was on the agenda. It would be his responsibility to show up if he was concerned about this. It was on the agenda. It's fair game to talk about him as a poll worker.
Anybody else?
Yeah, this all comes down, and, Joyce, I asked you or brought it up when we were voting on this. No one would have thought it would have been a problem. There's people on the list that probably have problems just as much as anybody else does. We get starting to cherry pick, we're losing the scope of what we're to do. This is about due process. He wasn't here to defend himself, and I don't think he thought he needed to be here. And it's not about him, it's about due process. It could be about anybody on the list. Was there sufficient bias in your statements? Yes, there was, and that was proven through the investigation.
And I disagree with that. But anyone could have said, can we table this until the next meeting? That wouldn't have been outside of the bounds. And, no, I didn't get messages from my constituents or from city residents about anybody else on that list. But I got 2 of them about John Kraft, which I brought to the council.
But in the investigation, it says that you got it the night of. So at what point would he have been able to, been notified of your concern? And what kind of due process would that person would have been afforded? None. There wasn't enough time.
Okay, so if that was a concern to you, then that would have been something that you could have requested, was tabling it till the next meeting and inviting him to that meeting.
But this isn't about me. This is about what was done. What you said to somebody was not here to defend themselves.
Right, but the meeting was noticed and he was on the agenda. That it was legally done? And that's the question. Was this legally done?
It's okay for us as council members, we signed and voted for.
All right, so.
May I
Go ahead.
finish, please,
Go ahead.
Mayor?
Yep.
We signed up to to debate. It's our position to challenge opposite opinions, to challenge whether we agree or disagree. The majority wins, that's how it goes, and we move on. That's okay. I certainly can do it better as respectfully as we can, and moving forward, I'm going to try as well. But at the same time, we cannot just let this go unchecked. A citizen was offended, wasn't here to defend himself, and I think the investigation proves that there were some legitimate concerns brought up, that he was somewhat challenged or defamed or whatever word you want to use for it. So at least a public apology, at least something to say, okay, maybe it was something you should have not said or handled differently. Let's fix it and move on. I don't want to censure you, Joyce.
I don't want to be censured.
But it can't go unchecked. We can't just disperse any citizen that comes in and we can't disperse it with no defense. No one can defend themselves if we're up here throwing them under the bus.
You know, we're not going to have a back and forth here on this.
Okay, well,
I mean, if you feel, go ahead, Joyce. I don't want to prevent you from speaking your mind here, but I mean, this isn't going to be a back and forth between council members. Go ahead.
Pardon? Yeah. As I said, I was doing my job. And, you know, and I don't see that I did something wrong here. And I think that if you censure me, then what's going to happen is then everything's going to be looked at under a microscope.
So, nobody wants to be here tonight. Nobody wants to go through this. Nobody relishes this at all. Is it appropriate is it part of the council's job to, if they see something, in this instance, a person that they don't think belongs on here, is it their job to raise a red flag? I'd say, yeah, absolutely. In the way, however, that this was done, I don't see that. And especially, I mean, Joyce, obviously we want to respond to and work on the behalf of our constituents, but I don't see that the action is defensible because you got two messages minutes before the meeting, and then come in and respond to that without, in your own mind, saying, is this right? What are the reasons here? What is cause? What does cause mean here? Before you actually went about trying to get him removed, and not only trying to get him removed, but in the way you did it. And I think the process, there could have been a process, and it's been mentioned here, the process easily could have been, you know what, I object to this name, I'd like to see this name pulled off for now, and have an opportunity to discuss this in the future, and perhaps allow him to come in and defend himself or answer the questions that we might have. Did you want to respond to that?
You're right. I probably got, okay, so there was a voicemail that was labeled 559. I probably listened to it, I don't remember for sure, but I probably listened to it on the way to the Finance Committee meeting. I didn't have time to prepare. But I did believe that all of you were aware of the the Facebook posts about the listening session. To tell you the truth, I have always felt comfortable in Hudson and not worried about my safety. But at that listening session, I was concerned about my safety because of the Facebook posts that were on there. And you're right. I did not do a good job of bringing that together because I didn't have time to prepare. So I can apologize for that.
So we could have, and I mean, I don't want to get into could have, should have, would have. Everybody makes mistakes. You know, we all make mistakes. We all do dumb things. We all say, we all at times hear words coming out of our mouth that we say, I can't believe I just said that.
And when I make a mistake, I do apologize.
So in this case, Joyce, this isn't the first time. You accused one of our police officers of being a white supremacist because he was in a photograph with a friend of his who, in your opinion, was flashing a white supremacist sign that you thought had been appropriated by white supremacists. And in fact, as it turned out, it was just a game that most people know about. And for people that don't know what I'm talking about, it's the circle game. And your kids did it. I did it when I was a kid. I was doing it all through college. But this isn't the first time.
No,
And-
I did not accuse him of being a white supremacist. I said that I felt that that picture was inappropriate. There's a big difference between saying that a
Well,
picture is inappropriate and
okay.
accusing somebody of being a white supremacist.
Let's
Miss-
say that that's accurate, okay? I don't believe that's accurate, but let's just say that is.
Mr. Mayor, I'm just wondering, is it possible for us to stick to Mr. Kraft's?
You know what? No, just a second,
Okay.
because I think this is relevant. This is about conduct that, you know, you had somebody here that was accused. I think the most egregious thing that happened in this was what appeared to be an accusation that John Kraft was a white supremacist because, as Joyce said in that meeting, he was wearing white supremacist outfit. So this has happened in the past. And we had an investigation in the past that turned up with nothing. That in fact, it was just a game. And just because people appropriate signs, attire, doesn't mean that everybody now that is wearing those things or doing those things is the type of person that you envision them to be. So again, this isn't, if this were a first time, all right, but it's not. It's not the first time.
And you've misinterpreted my actions, and
You think
this was sent to me by somebody else saying, would you please follow up on this, which I did.
which prompted an investigation of a police officer.
And I'm supposed to ignore something that somebody brings to me, a concern that somebody brings to me?
Well, all right, so back to this. In the, again, I think those are the most egregious things when you say that he was inciting, he was calling for civil war. I don't know if he did or not, that he was wearing white supremacist attire. And you throw this out at a meeting without having any opportunity for him to say, no, that's not right. And without even asking the question, did you ever ask him?
I had good sources for the information that I had.
Okay. So on 1, 2, 3, 4, in the fifth paragraph, it says after completing its review, talking about us, Hall's comments represented an appropriate, whether we have to find whether Hall's comments represented an appropriate inquiry pursuant to the good cause analysis for the approval of poll workers. That was not an inquiry. It was not an appropriate inquiry. So these are the things that bother me right now. But again, here, I don't want to censure you at all. I don't want to do that. I don't want to go down that road. You're right. I mean, once we start going down that road, it is a slippery slope. I don't think anybody here wants to do that. I think, however, it disturbs me that you maintain that you don't think that you did anything wrong. And what I would personally like to see is an acknowledgement that perhaps it wasn't done correctly. And I think that, I think in this case, an apology is warranted.
I've already acknowledged that I didn't do it correctly, that I didn't have time to prepare for it. And so I can apologize for that. But the other thing that I asked that night was, all right, we don't have criteria for the city for poll workers. I think that that is something that we should be discussing.
Well, but to that point, the law is clear on two things. It's clear on the qualifications, and it's pretty clear on cause, right? I mean, the qualifications for poll workers are pretty minimal. And there's a reason for that. It's hard to get poll workers, right? And we want people to be encouraged to be poll workers and to participate in elections. And so I don't know, I understand that discussion point, but you can't be more restrictive than state law on that particular point. So, while it's a valid concern, the only real question when names are put forth from the two major parties are, do the nominees meet the minimal qualifications, and is there any demonstrated cause for removal that would prevent them from serving? Those are the two lines of analysis that the council has to consider, and really there's no ability to be more restrictive than that under the statute.
And Mr. Vivian, so is that Wisconsin statute, that's 7.32A? So moving forward, if we see somebody that we feel does not have a good reputation and of sorts, we would do exactly what we have discussed here tonight. We would say, let's table that, or come forward with our research that we have and approve everyone with the exception of this individual for this reason.
I think that's exactly right, and the discussion here has been pretty productive, actually, on how you discuss controversial topics. You put them on an agenda, you present your research, you have your conversation. You know, the impartiality piece under the ethics code is coming to the table with an open mind to review whatever's put before the council, not to have prejudged a particular issue, but to say, I will review the information that staff puts before me or other council members. And it would appear to me that the core of the discussion here as to whether there was an ethics violation or not is the fact that that information wasn't placed on the table. There were comments that were made, and then there was a vote. But whether you think that Mr. Hall should have had the opportunity to be here or not, there wasn't, I'm sorry, Mr. Kraft, whether you think he should have been here or not, the information wasn't placed before the council to have that discussion, to consider the comments that were being made. And so the comments were made, and they are what they are. They were made in December, and that's what we're talking about. But moving forward, when there are issues that need support, when there are issues that need documentation, all of that information should be provided to the council, to the finance committee, to whichever body is considering the particular issue, so that all members considering the issue can come to it with an open mind, review the information, and then make an informed decision on whatever the question is.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Guys?
So I acknowledge the criticisms and acknowledge my lack of preparation and apologize for that. And in the future, I see that it would be a better way of doing this would be to say, I have gotten some objections from city residents, and I'd like to discuss this in the future, so I would like to table this particular person's approval until in our next meeting.
Anybody?
I'm glad to see that you apologize. And it was in public, I guess, but I don't know, does it go far enough? Do you apologize to Mr. Kraft? I don't know if that's something that needs to be done. Probably, and maybe that would get this off our plate. I don't know if you want to do that or not, but I think maybe that would be in order, and then possibly we could dismiss this.
Got a motion?
Not yet, I'd like to talk about it.
Okay. Anybody?
I really have a problem when we insult or attack the citizenry, when they're not even here to defend themselves. If we have a code of ethics, we need to follow it. Otherwise, we should take it out of our ordinances. I think, Joyce, you're sincere about you made the mistake of not preparing for it, and thank you. I think that she is probably genuine, feels regret about how it was handled. So, thank you. But we can't oversight due process. We can't overlook it. We can't not have somebody who actually filed a complaint. And in the 16 years I've been here, this is the first time I've ever seen a resident do that. So it was really disturbing. These are the times we live in, which is terrible. And as leaders, including myself, it's up to us to act better than probably at times that we have not acted appropriately, and take accountability for those actions as we move forward.
Anybody?
Would you be willing to apologize to Mr. Kraft just from your approach? And the only reason I say that is he is the one that put in the ethics complaint.
Bill, I'm sorry, could you say that once more? I'm not sure I understand that last.
I was just asking Alderperson Hall if she would apologize to Mr. Kraft for the approach that she took, seeing that he is the one that submitted the ethics complaint.
Okay.
Yeah. But that's what I would like to see, and I.
I can apologize for not being prepared for the meeting, but I still have concerns about him as a poll worker. And the information that I've gotten since then has not allayed those concerns. So I need to think about anything further than that.
Alderperson Brooke, I don't mean to put you on the spot. What are your thoughts?
Well, I've heard some things about personal bias, and I find that a bit hypocritical, myself included. It would be just being incredibly lacking self-awareness. There's not one of us on this council that doesn't have personal bias, and it spills over into our public discussions. I think we've seen it, and even in my short time here, I've seen it, and perhaps have been on the receiving end. So some of those things are hard for me to make peace with. You know, I certainly can respect the request for an apology on the approach and maybe on the delivery. I certainly can find and make peace with that. I do ask, I think it's an incredible reminder to all of us that we are the leaders and that we're called to be above reproach. And I think that starts with how we treat each other, even when we disagree, always with civil discourse. And I hope that this is a real opportunity for us to move forward, because I think a lot of these things take us away from the business at hand. We are not doing our job at running the city, and it makes me very sad that taxpayer dollars are spent on a lot of attorney fees and a lot of other things. Not that I don't appreciate Mr. Vivian, I don't mean that. We have real work to do that involves our day-to-day business operations, and this takes away from it. And so I think an apology, as Councilmember Hall has indicated she's going to think about that, but I think that's reasonable, and I ask that each one of us really go back, myself included, and really think about how we treat each other across the table, because until we can do it, how can we expect our community to do it?
Thank you again. I didn't mean to put you on the spot like that, but
That's probably more than you wanted.
well, no. I just wanted to hear what your perspective was. So would it be, I guess, obviously nothing is going to happen here tonight, it doesn't appear. But I feel like if an apology could be made directly to Mr. Kraft publicly for the approach taken, I think that, to me, we wouldn't need to come back to. But if that is not, perhaps we take a look at this as a council and, you know, have that conversation, which I think our next council meeting is this coming Tuesday.
Tuesday?
After Martin Luther King Jr. Day, so.
Yes.
And I guess that would be a motion that I would make.
What?
Sorry.
What?
I make the motion that, it was a wonky thing to, yeah. I make the motion to give Alderperson Hall the weekend to make a public apology to Mr. Kraft for the approach that she took on the December 6th meeting. And if there is not, that we reconvene at council to have the conversation about taking action.
Well, what does that mean,
That's a good question.
public apology? I mean,
Well, my understanding is that whatever is decided at this committee has to be brought to the council for final approval, so, is that correct, Nick?
Correct. The process is outlined in the ethics code, is that this committee makes a recommendation to the common council, and then the common council then votes on that recommendation. Now, certainly, you could forward no recommendation to the council or a recommendation for censure if an apology is not offered. But I would be as specific as possible
Got it.
in directing the action moving forward so that we don't get to the council meeting
Right,
with an
right.
open question as to what needs to
And
happen.
back ending into,
Correct.
right.
And before you make the motion, I'd like to say that, you know, there was no process here that I could follow, except to bring my concerns to the council. So please keep that in mind. when making your motion.
Sorry. I guess I motion that we make the recommendation to council to do some form of discipline up and including censure at the next council meeting. I guess that would be,
That feels a little bit different than what we were talking about. Sorry.
right? And that's why I'm like,
Could we say unless there is a public apology issued?
yeah, I guess it's reverse of what I was saying before then, maybe.
And that would be the affirmative motion, would be that the council consider the censure resolution if no public apology is issued prior to the meeting regarding the approach taken to presenting the information demonstrating cause.
And when you say public apology, well, first of all, I've made a public apology here. So if you're saying public apology, I think it's important to me to know exactly what it is that you're looking for and how I should be doing that. Does that mean taking an ad out in the paper? Does that mean writing a Facebook post? Does that mean yelling it from the top of City Hall? You know, it's important to know exactly what it is that you want me to do.
I think publicly on the microphone here or at the or at your seat or whatever, as long as it's directed to the same individual that filed the complaint.
So you mean Tuesday night at the meeting, is
I don't
what you're
know if
saying?
tonight would work or not, either way, or
I,
it has to go to council.
personally, in situations like this, when apologies are offered, I think they need to be offered in the same forum that the action that necessitated or spawned an apology. I think that's the appropriate venue.
Yeah.
Written.
So maybe a clarifier could be a public apology made at the next council meeting?
Yes. I'm sorry, I'm making the motion, needing help making the motion, right?
Let's see.
Becky, can you read that back?
And I would suggest that if that's the approach that's going to be taken, that if there is going to be a statement that's made by Councilmember Hall, ultimately that it be a written statement that she read at the next council meeting, so she has the time to prepare it, and that she can, speak through it at the council meeting. But again, that's going to be her choice as to whether a statement is made, and your motion, as I understand it, Member Alms, is that the motion be to recommend a public censure unless a statement is made by Councilmember Hall apologizing to Mr. Kraft for the manner in which the information was presented in her challenge to his nomination as a poll worker.
Councilmember
Beautiful.
Al.
Yeah, go ahead. I mean, that is what I'm, yeah.
Councilmember
set.
Alms, I did take notes, and maybe this is, if I understand what I think you are indicating, is it would be a motion saying that Councilmember Hall would offer a public apology at the next council meeting. Should that not happen, further action may be deemed necessary by the Ethics Committee. Is that
I don't think that's what you're saying.
okay?
And I only say that because the summary would have it come back to this body for further recommendation. And I
Okay.
think the question for you, Mr. Alms, is whether you're making a recommendation to the council to take action if there's not a public apology, or is your motion that there's the opportunity for a public apology, and should there not be a public apology by the council meeting, then it comes back to this body. You have two different bodies. You have the ethics committee and you have the council.
Correct.
Right. So we need to be specific as to which one you're directing this matter to if there is no statement.
It is the former of what you stated. Sorry, it's been a long day.
All right, do we have that? Do we know what that is?
Well, yeah, I got the majority. Well,
Can you repeat it so that I understand it? And the other thing that I'd like to know is exactly which part of the ethics code do you believe that I have violated? Because that's what this is all about.
It was pointed out by the attorney and pointed out in the number that she quoted, 37-1, 37-2.
What was that, Randy? I'm sorry.
It was pointed out under 37-1 and 37-2 in the attorney's memo.
So you're saying that I violated that, and exactly how did I violate that?
Impartial
Well, that's
and
the
regardless of the personal considerations,
statute, the ability to challenge
is where it's at.
for cause.
And that's what the lawyer found under the
Yeah,
ethical
that's not-
line.
That's not part of the statute, that's just part of my analysis.
So, are we clear on a motion?
I have recommend a public censor unless a public statement by Councilmember Hall is made to Mr. Kraft at the next council meeting, which is the January 18th.
Regarding the approach or the manner in which the
Regarding the
information
approach,
was presented.
correct.
So you wanted to come back to this body and not finish the issue at council?
No, the motion directs the matter to council.
No, so we could end at council, end the discussion.
Correct. It would not come back to this ethics committee.
Okay. And I will second that.
All right, we got a motion and a second. Everybody clear on it? Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion's approved. Thank you, everybody, for being here. It's a very difficult night, I know that. And Joyce, thank you for participating here tonight. That's difficult. Is there a motion?
Move to adjourn?
Second.
Got a motion second to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. We stand adjourned. Thanks, everybody.